Something happened to me at Oregon State Hospital, and to this day I can't explain it. My name is Emma Hartley. I'm 34 years old. I'm a freelance journalist. Or I was. After my divorce, things fell apart quickly. I lost contracts. I lost my house. I lost the will to get up in the morning. So, when a YouTube channel offered me $3,000 to spend a night in the abandoned hydrotherapy unit of Oregon State Psychiatric Hospital, I accepted without much thought. Not because I believed in ghosts, not because I was brave. I just needed the money. The hospital is located in Salem, Oregon, a giant red brick building surrounded by rusty fences and condemned property signs. It closed in the 1980s, but its history is much older. In the 1940s and 50s, they performed treatments there. Hydrotherapy, they called it. Basically, they drowned patients in tubs of ice water until they stopped screaming. I read about it. I thought it was awful, but I continued. I arrived at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. The sky was gray, heavy, as if it were going to rain at any moment. The security guard handed me a rusty key and said, "You have until 6 in the morning. Don't break anything. Don't sue anyone if you get hurt." He didn't even look me in the eye. I went in alone. The door creaked as if it hadn't been opened in years. The main hallway was long, dark, with cracked white tiles and damp stains on the walls. The air smelled of mold, rust, and something else. Something sweet, like old meat. I turned on my flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but it didn't help much. Everything seemed to absorb the light instead of reflecting it. I set up my equipment in the lobby. Infrared camera, EVP recorders, digital thermometers, things the channel asked for. I didn't know how to use half of it, but I pretended I did. While I was adjusting the camera, I felt something, a subtle change in temperature. It wasn't cold. It was as if the air became heavier, denser. I looked around. Nothing. Just nerves, I thought. I walked through the corridors, empty rooms, overturned stretchers, rusty wheelchairs, everything covered in a thick layer of dust. But what bothered me most was the silence. It wasn't an ordinary silence. It was an attentive silence, as if the place were listening. I found the sign. Hydrotherapy wing. Restricted access. The door was ajar. I pushed slowly. The creaking sound echoed like a muffled scream. And there they were. The bathtubs, 6 of them, lined up, made of cast iron, rusty, empty, with chains still attached to the sides, chains for restraining the wrists, for restraining the ankles, to prevent them from escaping. I stood there, staring, trying to imagine how many people had drowned there, how many had screamed, how many had pleaded, and then I listened. An echo, weak, distant, like dripping water, but there was no water. I stood there for a few minutes, just listening. The sound of dripping water continued, irregular, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but when I looked with the flashlight, all the taps were dry, too rusty to work. "Old pipes," I murmured to myself. That's all. I went back to the lobby and set up the rest of the equipment. I placed recorders in different rooms, adjusted the infrared cameras to record all night. All of this took almost 2 hours. When I finished, it was already 6:30 in the afternoon. The sun had completely disappeared. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and picked up my cell phone. 2 bars of signal, better than I expected. I called my sister, Rachel. "Emma, are you okay?" She answered on the second call. "I am. I just wanted to hear a familiar voice." "You're in that hospital, aren't you?" "I am." Silence on the other end. Then she sighed. "Emma, you don't have to do this. You can come home. Stay with me until—" "I need the money, Rachel." My voice came out harsher than I intended. "I can't keep depending on you. I've done that enough already." You're not depending on me. You're recovering from a divorce. It's different. It is not. Another silence. A longer one this time. You always do this, she said softly. You run away from things. You take crazy jobs. You isolate yourself. You put yourself in dangerous situations. This place won't hurt you, Emma. You hurt yourself. Her words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I need to go, I said, and hung up before she could answer. I sat there, staring at my phone. Rachel was right. I knew it, but admitting it was harder than spending the night in a haunted hospital. I put my phone away and decided to explore further. I continued down another corridor, passing empty rooms. Most were covered in old graffiti, names, dates, depressing messages. In one of them, someone had written, "They wouldn't let us sleep. They wouldn't let us dream." I continued walking until I found a smaller room at the end of the corridor. The door was ajar. I pushed it open carefully. It was an archive. Metal shelves covered in dust. Yellowed folders. Old documents. I picked up a random folder and opened it. Medical records. Names. Ages. Diagnoses. Most were women. Young. Admitted for hysteria. Melancholy. Excessive nervousness. One folder caught my eye. It was newer than the others. Less dusty. Shelter. Patient 47. Eliza Thorne, age 28 years. Admitted March 12, 1952. Diagnosis: severe postpartum psychosis treatment, forced hydrotherapy, mechanical restraint. Status: deceased, November 3, 1952. Accidental drowning during treatment. My breath caught in my throat. Accidental drowning. I turned the pages. There were handwritten notes, scribbled quickly. The patient resisted violently. Restraint necessary. Prolonged treatment. And on the last page, a photo, black and white, faded. A thin woman with dark hair and deep-set eyes, staring directly at the camera. Expressionless. Lifeless. Eliza Thorne. I closed the folder quickly. My heart was racing. She was just a person, I murmured. Just a person who suffered. But the photo, her eyes, seemed to follow me. I left the room and went back to the lobby. I checked the recorders. They were all working. I checked the cameras. They were all recording. It was 8 o'clock at night. There were still 10 hours to go. I sat down again, trying to calm myself. The silence returned, heavy, attentive. And then I listened again. The sound of dripping water, higher this time, coming from the hydrotherapy sector. I stood up slowly, gripping the flashlight tightly. My hand was trembling. It wasn't fear, yet. It was just nervousness, anticipation. I walked back down the corridor to the hydrotherapy area. Each step echoed. The sound of dripping water grew louder as I approached. Plick, plick, plick. Constant, methodical. I reached the door. It was still ajar. I pushed it open carefully. The room was exactly as I had left it. The 6 bathtubs lined up, the chains hanging. Everything covered in rust and dust. But the sound was coming from inside one of the bathtubs, the third from the left. I approached slowly, shining my flashlight on the floor. The bathtub was empty, dry, not a drop of water, but the sound continued. Plick, plick, plick. I leaned over the edge, shining the light inside. Nothing, just cracked porcelain and dark stains that could be anything. Then I heard something different. A cry. Weak, muffled, feminine, coming from inside the bathtub. My blood ran cold. Hello? My voice came out shaky, ridiculous. Is anyone there? Silence. I grabbed my audio recorder and turned it on. I placed it near the bathtub. If there was anything there, the recorder would pick it up. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Nothing. I was about to hang up when I heard the sound of metal creaking. I turned my head. The bathtub faucet next to me was moving, slowly, spinning on its own. My whole body froze. I couldn't move. I could only watch as the tap kept turning, until it was fully open, and then the water started to come out, icy cold, crystal clear. It gushed out forcefully, filling the bathtub quickly. No, this isn't happening. My voice was a desperate whisper. I ran to the tap and tried to turn it off. I put both hands on it and turned it with all my might, but it was stuck, too rusty. It wouldn't budge. And the water kept coming out. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. My flashlight fell to the ground, rolling until it stopped near the wall. And then another tap started turning, and another one, and another one. All 6 bathtubs began to fill at the same time. The sound was deafening. Water gushing, hitting the metal, echoing off the walls. And underneath it all, I could still hear it. The crying. It wasn't one. It was several, female, male, children, everyone crying, everyone screaming, everyone submerged, as if they were drowning. My breath became short. My chest tightened. I felt a pressure in my skull, as if the air was being sucked out of the room. And then I saw the chains. The chains attached to the sides of the bathtubs were moving. Not because of the water. They moved on their own, shaking, pulling, as if invisible hands were gripping them, trying to break free. I screamed. I don't know what I yelled. I just know I ran away. I ran down the hallway, stumbling, bumping my shoulders against the walls. My flashlight was left behind. The only light now was from my cell phone, which I held in a trembling hand. I stopped in the middle of the hallway, breathing heavily. I leaned against the wall, trying to calm myself. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. But then, I felt something wet. I looked down. My sneakers were soaked. The hallway floor was covered in water, not much, just enough to wet my feet. But it was there, cold, real, and it was moving. Not like stagnant water. It was flowing, towards me, as if it were following me. I took a step back. The water moved forward. I took another step. The water continued to flow. I looked down the hallway behind me, dry, completely dry. I looked ahead, wet, and getting deeper. The water was rising. Run. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. The water was rising to my ankles now, soaking my pants. Each step made a wet, sucking sound that echoed through the empty hallway. I tried the first door on my right. It was locked. The second one, also locked. The third one. Nothing. No. My voice was broken, desperate. I reached the end of the corridor and turned left. Another corridor, longer, darker, and the water kept following me. I looked back. The hallway I had just crossed was flooded up to my shins, but the hallway ahead of me was dry, completely dry, until I take 3 more steps. Then the water appeared, rising from the ground, as if it were sprouting from the cracks in the tiles. My phone slipped from my wet hand. I caught it before it fell. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. No signal, obviously. I tried calling 911 anyway. Nothing, just static silence. I took a deep breath. I tried to think. I needed to find a way out, any way out. And then I listened. Steps, wet, dragged, slow, coming from behind me. Splash, splash, splash. I stopped breathing. I turned slowly, illuminating the hallway with the dim light of my cell phone. Nothing, just water, rising, already reaching my knees. But the footsteps continued. Splash, splash, splash. Closer and closer. I turned off my phone's light. I don't know why. Instinct. As if hiding in the darkness could protect me. I stood there, trembling, listening. The footsteps stopped. Silence, Only the sound of the water rising, slowly, inexorably. And then, a whisper. Low, wet, distorted. Emma. My name. Someone had said my name, but it wasn't a normal voice. It was as if someone were speaking underwater. Muffled, choked. Who's there? My voice was a mere whisper. No response. Just the whisper again. Emma. Closer this time. I turned my phone's light back on. Here you go. Wet footprints, on the ground, coming towards me. But there was no one there. Just the footprints. Slow, deliberate, one after the other, walking towards me. I backed up until my back hit a door. I tried to open it. Miraculously, it gave way. I quickly went inside and closed the door behind me, locking it with a rusty bolt. I leaned against her, breathing heavily. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. The room was small, no windows, just an old table, a broken chair, and a stretcher, with its leather straps still attached. I tried not to look at it. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, trying to calm myself down. It's not real. It's not real. It's just stress. It's just in my head. But my clothes were soaked. My feet were freezing. The water was real. I stood there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, just waiting, listening. Nothing. Silence. I started to think that maybe it was over. Maybe I could get out, find the front door, escape from there. And then, I listened again. Emma. On the other side of the door. No, not on the other side. From inside the room, behind me. My whole body went cold. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see. But my neck twisted on its own, as if something were forcing it. And I saw it. A figure, standing, in the corner of the room. Soaked, long, flowing hair covering her face. Heavy clothes clinging to her body, dripping. She wasn't moving. I was just there, breathing. Tall, wet. Each breath sounded like water flowing in and out of waterlogged lungs. I closed my eyes tightly. It's not here. It's not here. It's not here. When I opened it, she was closer. I hadn't seen her move. But she was there, just 3 meters from me. Still with my back turned, still breathing. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. And then, she began to turn around. Slowly. Her wet hair streamed down her pale, swollen face. The eyes, empty. White. As if they had been washed away by water. Her mouth was open, too wide. And from inside her, water, gushing out, running down her chin. She pointed at me, and he whispered, "You're going to drown too." I screamed. I don't know for how long. I just screamed until my throat tore. And then, everything went black. I woke up lying on the floor, cold, wet, shivering. My head was throbbing. My whole body ached, as if I'd been beaten. I slowly opened my eyes. The room was empty. The figure had vanished. But the water was still there. Rising up to my knees now. Freezing. Real. I dragged myself to the door, unlocked it, and stepped out into the hallway. The water was everywhere. Up to my waist. Heavy, dense. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But I couldn't run away anymore. Something inside me. Something was pulling me back. For the hydrotherapy sector. I walked through the water, pushing against the current that seemed to resist me. Each step was a battle, as if the water was trying to drag me down. I arrived at the entrance. The door was wide open now, inviting. I went in. The 6 bathtubs were still overflowing. The water cascaded down, filling the room and climbing up the walls. But there was something different. Something stuck between two of the bathtubs. A book. No, a diary. Soaked. Pages swollen, but still legible. I picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. The handwriting was feminine, delicate, but it became more erratic with each page, more desperate. March 12th, 1952. They brought me here today. They say I'm sick, that I can't take care of my baby, but I was just tired. I just wanted to sleep. March 20th, 1952. The nurses are cruel. They hold me underwater when I scream. They say it's treatment, that it will cure me. April 15th, 1952. I can't feel my fingers anymore. They trap me in bathtubs for hours. The water is always freezing, always rising, always drowning me. November 3rd, 1952. Today they're going to drown me again. I know, I feel it, but this time, I won't scream. I won't beg. This time, I'll take them with me. Everyone who enters here, everyone who ignores me, everyone who forgets me, I'm going to make them remember. The pages ended there. Eliza Thorne. She wasn't trapped here. She was hunting. I closed the diary and looked around. The water was rising faster now, up to my chest. And then, all 6 bathtubs began to overflow at once. Water gushing out, flooding like a violent wave. The force knocked me down. I was dragged backward, slamming against the wall. My head spun, my vision blurred. I fought, I swam, I kicked. I managed to reach the door. I managed to get out of the room. The hallway was flooded to the ceiling now. I swam, with all the strength I had left. I saw light, the front door, open. I pushed, I swam. I breathed when I had no air left. And finally, I left. I fell onto the wet grass outside. I coughed. I vomited water. I screamed. I looked back. The building was dry, completely dry. No water running off. No flooding, just the windows. All the windows in the hydrotherapy area were covered in condensation, as if someone had breathed against them. And in each one hand, pressed from the inside, small, pale, desperate, dozens of them. They're all looking at me. I left that night. I never went back. I never investigated anything paranormal again. The channel paid me. I used the money to start over. I moved to a different city. I tried to forget, but I can't. Because every night, when I take a shower, when I close my eyes under the shower, I'm listening. Emma. Whispered. Wet. Submerged. And sometimes, I feel it. Cold fingers, wrapping around my ankle, pulling. Slowly. Down. I've never told this to anyone, but now you know. And if you've listened this far, maybe she's listening to you too. So, pay attention. The next time you're alone, in the bathroom, in the dark, and to hear water dripping, don't look, just leave. Because if you see the hand, it will be too late by then. If this made you uncomfortable, it's because you don't know what comes next. Sign up and never shower alone again. Something happened to me at Hudson Valley Psychiatric Hospital. And even now, 3 weeks later, I wake up with wet hands and the smell of mold clinging to my skin. My name is Maya Corrigan. I'm 32 years old, a freelance photographer in New York, and for the past 8 months my life has been a silent mess. Divorce finalized in March, career practically frozen, insomnia that makes me see the ceiling of my apartment in Bushwick every night until 4 in the morning. When I received the offer to photograph abandoned buildings for a digital magazine called Urban Decay, I accepted immediately. Not out of passion, out of pure financial desperation. $1,500 per photo shoot. I needed it. The publisher suggested 3 locations. I chose the Hudson Valley Psychiatric Hospital in Poughkeepsie, a 2-hour drive north of Manhattan, closed since 1965. Thousands of patients were treated with methods that today would be considered torture: lobotomies, electric shocks, forced hydrotherapy. I spent 2 days researching. I read old reports, saw faded photos of endless corridors and rusty operating rooms. The more I read, the more something bothered me. It wasn't fear, it was weight, as if those walls carried physical memories of suffering. On the morning of November 12th, a gray and cold Tuesday, I left home at 6 o'clock. I took my Canon EOS R5, 2 lenses, a tripod, a tactical flashlight, and a thermos of coffee that had gone cold before I left town. The road was empty, low fog, silence, no music on the radio, just me and my bad thoughts. I arrived at the hospital around 8:30. The main gate was locked with rusty chains, but there was an opening in the side fence, all too obvious. Other explorers had already been there. The building was immense. Red bricks covered in dead ivy, windows broken like empty eyes, the entire structure leaning to the left, as if collapsing in slow motion. I stood outside for about 5 minutes, just observing. There's something about abandoned places that makes you hesitate. It's not fear of being robbed or of it collapsing. It's something else. It's the feeling that you're about to trespass on a place that doesn't want visitors. I took a deep breath. I put the camera strap around my neck. I went inside. The main hallway smelled of mold, rust, and something sweet and rotten that I couldn't identify. Cracked white tiles, overturned stretchers, rusty wheelchairs, recent graffiti on the walls. "Get out," in red letters. I started taking photos. Weak natural light streamed in through the windows. Dry, sharp clicks echoed. Everything seemed too empty. And then, while adjusting the lens, I felt it. Someone was watching me. I turned around quickly. Nothing, just shadows and silence. But I swear I heard footsteps, slow, dragging, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. I stood there for about 10 seconds, holding the camera tightly, listening. Nothing, just the wind hitting some broken window in the distance. I tried to convince myself that it was just the natural sounds of an old building settling down. I moved on. I explored the main corridor for about 20 minutes. I photographed consultation rooms with overturned metal tables, medical files scattered on the floor, yellowed papers full of handwritten notes. I picked one up. It was an admission report from 1958. Female patient, 24 years old, diagnosed with acute hysteria, treatment prescribed, isolation and hydrotherapy. I felt a knot in my stomach. This wasn't just a story. These were real lives. People who suffered here. Women who were locked up, drugged, drowned in the name of medicine. I kept walking. The hospital's layout was a labyrinth. Corridors crisscrossed without any apparent logic. Some led to empty rooms, others ended at brick walls. The temperature dropped as I progressed. My breath began to smell like steam. At the end of Corridor C, in the east wing, I found a heavy metal door, slightly ajar. There was a rusty sign nailed to it, Hydrotherapy Ward, authorized personnel only. My heart raced. It was exactly what I was looking for. The hydrotherapy room, the place where the treatments took place. Restraint tubs, patients tied up and submerged in ice-cold water for hours. Some drowned. Others went completely insane. I pushed the door open slowly. It creaked loudly, a sharp sound that cut through the silence like a fingernail on a chalkboard. I hesitated. I looked back. The hallway was empty, but I felt that sensation again. Someone watching me. Someone waiting for me to come in. "You came all this way, Maya," I thought to myself. "You're not going to give up now." I took a deep breath. I turned on the flashlight. I went inside. The room was larger than I had expected. High ceiling, cracked white tile walls, dark stains of dampness running down like tears. In the center were 4 enormous, deep cast-iron bathtubs. Each had chains attached to the sides, chains for the wrists, chains for the ankles. Rotten canvas tarps still hung from hooks on the wall, used to cover patients as the water rose. Something inside me froze. It wasn't exactly fear. It was sadness, anger, repulsion. I was there to transform that place into art, into content, into money. Was that right? I raised the camera anyway. Click, click, click. Suddenly, the camera screen flickered. Then it went dark. Dead battery. Impossible. It was at 87% when I joined. I tried calling again. Nothing. And then I heard it. Water running. It wasn't a distant sound. It was right there, in that room, as if someone had turned on a tap. I turned the flashlight towards the bathtubs. They were all dry. The pipes had been cut decades ago, but the sound continued. Running water. Constant. Real. My whole body froze. And then, slowly, very slowly, the chain attached to the bathtub in the center began to move, not swaying in the wind, moving. As if someone were pulling from the other side. I took a step back. My breath caught in my throat. The flashlight trembled in my hand. "Get out of here!" my mind screamed, but my feet wouldn't move. The current gave a sharp tug, and I ran. I ran down the corridor without looking back. My footsteps echoed too loudly. My breath burned in my throat. I turned left, then right, searching for the main exit, but everything seemed different now. The corridors were darker. The walls seemed closer. I stopped to breathe. I leaned my back against the cold wall and closed my eyes. "Calm down, Maya. Calm down. You're panicking. It's all in your head." I opened my eyes. I looked at the flashlight. The light was weak, yellowish, and flickering. That's when I realized I was back in Corridor C, facing the door to the hydrotherapy room. How? I had run in the opposite direction. I was sure of it. My stomach churned. Something was wrong, very wrong. But at the same time, a part of me wanted to go back inside. It didn't make sense. It was like something was pulling me back. A morbid curiosity. A need to understand what I had seen. Just one more look, I thought. Just to make sure it was just my imagination. I pushed the door again. It opened without resistance this time. Silently. I entered slowly, illuminating every corner with my flashlight. The bathtubs were still there. The chains were motionless now. Everything seemed normal, abandoned, dead. I took a few more steps. My sneakers made a wet, squeaking sound. I looked down. The ground was soaked. Puddles of clean, crystal-clear water, as if someone had just poured it in. But there were no leaks, no pipes working, nothing. I followed the puddles to the central bathtub, and then I saw the bathtub was full, filled to the brim. The water was murky and dark, with a strong metallic smell that went straight up my throat and made me gag. My whole body froze. My eyes couldn't look away, because inside the water, there was something. No. Someone. A reflection. A face. Pale. Eyes wide open. Mouth gaping in a silent scream. It wasn't my reflection. She was a woman. Long hair floating around her face. Skin as white as wax. Eyes fixed on me. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. And then, underwater, the face moved. Her mouth opened wider. Her hands rose slowly, distorted by the water, as if trying to reach the surface. I screamed. I tripped backward, fell on the wet ground, and the flashlight rolled away. The sound of churning water filled the room, violent, desperate, like someone struggling, trying to breathe, trying to get out. And then, the currents, all 4 bathtubs. The chains began to move, on their own, dragging across the metal with a sharp creak that pierced my ears. They stretched out of the bathtubs, toward me. He's running. He's running. I stood up, slipped, stood up again. I grabbed the flashlight. I ran to the door. I heard it behind me. Laughter. Children's laughter, mixed with crying, and the sound of chains dragging on the ground. I left the room. I slammed the door shut. I kept running. This time, I didn't look back. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes, hours. The hospital seemed endless. Each corridor led to another corridor. Each door opened into a room I swore I'd seen before. My lungs were burning. My throat was dry. My legs were trembling. Finally, I saw natural light. A broken window at the end of a hallway. Daylight. Exit. I ran towards her, but when I got close, I stopped. The window overlooked an inner courtyard, surrounded by more buildings. A dead end. No, no, no. I turned to go back, but the corridors were now completely dark. The light from my flashlight barely reached 2 meters ahead. I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe, trying to think. That's when I felt it. Something cold touched the back of my neck. It wasn't wind, it was a hand. Wet, cold. Long fingers pressing against my skin. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked up. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I heard a breath. Very close to my ear. Heavy. Wet. Like someone who just came out from underwater. And then, a voice. Weak. Broken. Please. My whole body shivered. Please. Remove the chains. I forced my eyes to move. I looked to the side. Slowly. Slowly. Nothing. There was nobody there, but the hand was still there. I could feel it. Cold, squeezing. Let go! I yelled, throwing myself forward, slipping and falling to my knees. I turned the flashlight around. Empty. But on the ground, where I was leaning, there was a puddle of water. And within the puddle, reflected in some impossible way, was the face. The same woman. The same eyes. The same open mouth. But now she was crying. Tears streamed down his pale face, mingling with dark water. And behind her, in the water, I saw more faces. Dozens. All submerged. All looking at me. All with their mouths open in silent screams. The flashlight blinked. It was deleted. Total darkness. I was alone in the dark, listening. Wet footsteps. Several, coming from all directions. Currents dragging, closer and closer. Children's laughter echoing off the walls. And then, right in front of me, just inches from my face, I heard the voice again. You came to us. Something touched my face. Wet fingers, many fingers, sliding across my cheek, neck, shoulders. I screamed. I stood up. I ran blindly into the dark. I bumped into walls. I tripped. I fell. I got up again. And suddenly, light, sunlight, strong, dazzling. I was outside. The parking lot is empty. My car is just a few meters away. I ran to him, opened the door with my hands trembling so much I almost dropped the keys. I got in. I locked the doors. I started the engine. I looked in the rearview mirror. The hospital was there. Silent. Still. As if nothing had happened. But when I looked at my hands on the steering wheel, I saw it. They were wet. Soaked. And there were marks. Red marks around my wrists. It was as if someone had tried to arrest me. With chains. I drove back to New York without stopping. 2 hours on the road that felt like days. Hands on the wheel. Eyes fixed on the road. Trying not to think. Trying not to feel. But I could feel it. The smell of mold. The cold water. The hand on the back of my neck. When I arrived at my apartment in Bushwick, it was already night. I locked the door. I locked it again. I put on the chain. I took a hot shower for 40 minutes. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, but the smell wouldn't go away. That hospital smell, metallic, of stagnant water and cold meat. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the woman in the water, her eyes open, her mouth screaming silently. 3 days have passed. I didn't leave the house. I didn't answer calls. The magazine editor sent 4 emails asking about the photos. I had completely forgotten about the camera. Finally, on the 4th day, I mustered the courage to pick it up. It was in my backpack, still switched off. The battery was dead, as I remembered. I plugged it in to charge. I waited. When I called, my stomach dropped. There were 47 photos saved. I started walking past them. Empty corridors, abandoned rooms, rusty wheelchairs, everything normal. Up to photo number 34, it was the hydrotherapy room, the 4 bathtubs, empty, chains hanging from the sides. But there was something in the central bathtub, something I hadn't noticed when I took the photo. I enlarged the image. My blood froze. Inside the empty bathtub, there was a figure, pale, submerged, hair floating around her face. It was her, exactly as I had seen in the reflection. But the bathtub was empty when the photo was taken. I was sure of it. I moved on to the next image. My hand was shaking so much I almost dropped the camera. Photo number 35. Same room, same angle. The figure was closer to the edge of the bathtub now. His hands gripped the iron sides, as if he were trying to get out. Photo 36. The figure was standing inside the bathtub, looking directly at the camera. For me, I couldn't continue. I turned off the camera. I threw it in the corner of the room. But at night, when I turned off the lights, I heard it. Water dripping. In my apartment. I followed the sound to the bathroom. The tap was off. The shower, too. But I could hear it. Clearly. Constantly. Ping. 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 I opened the cabinet under the sink. I checked the pipes. Nothing. I closed the bathroom door and went back to the bedroom. The sound continued, coming from under my bed. I knelt down. I used my cell phone as a light. There was a puddle of water on the ground. Clean water. Cold. Spreading slowly across the wooden floor. My heart raced. And then I heard the voice. Weak. Wet. Coming from some impossible place. You opened the door. I jumped up. I turned on all the lights in the apartment. But the smell lingered. The smell of a hospital, of stagnant water, of death. I looked at my hands. They were wet again, and around my wrists, the red marks had returned, deeper this time, as if the chains were tightening. It's been 3 weeks since that day. I didn't go back to the hospital. I didn't send the photos. I didn't tell anyone. But every night, I wake up with wet hands. Every night, I hear water running somewhere in the apartment. And every night, when I look in the bathroom mirror, for a fraction of a second, I see someone behind me, pale, soaked, with her mouth open. I left there. But something came with me. And I think she wants to take me back. For the water, for the currents, a place she could never escape to. If this has stayed with you this far, you're carrying something now too. Comment. I heard the whispers. And if you want more confessions that shouldn't be shared, subscribe, because there are worse stories, much worse, and they're waiting for you. But something happened to me, and to this day I can't explain it. But before I tell you what I saw, I need you to understand one thing. I'm not crazy. At least, I wasn't. My name is Emma Corrigan. I'm 34 years old, a psychiatrist, or I was, depending on how you see someone who spent 6 months away from work due to burnout. 6 months locked in my house, trying to understand why my marriage fell apart, why I couldn't sleep anymore, why each patient seemed to suck me dry from the inside until there was nothing left. But I came back. I needed to come back. The Colorado Ridge Psychiatric Institute is a 40-minute drive from Denver, nestled in the mountains like an old wound that never healed. The main building is still functioning, modern wing, cool lights, smell of disinfectant. But the East Wing, that was closed years ago. Delayed retirements, budget cuts, the usual. They say they're going to reopen. Nobody believes them. My first day back was on a gray Monday in November. It was drizzling, the kind of rain that never seems to stop, only changing in intensity. I parked, took a deep breath, and looked at the building. The windows in the East Wing were dark. They always had been. When I entered, the receptionist greeted me with a smile that seemed rehearsed. "Dr. Corrigan, it's so good to have you back." I lied and said it was good to be there too. Dr. Halloway, my supervisor, greeted me in the hallway. He had that irritatingly paternal manner, as if I were a patient, not a colleague. "Emma, no rush, okay? You've been through a lot. If you need anything." I just wanted to work. I just wanted to prove that I could still do it. He gave me the simplest cases, routine checkups, medication adjustments, nothing too demanding, nothing that would break me down again. In the afternoon, I did my rounds. Patients were calm, conversations were brief. Everything was normal, everything was under control. But as I walked through the corridor connecting the modern wing to the East Wing, I felt something strange. The air was heavier, damp. It wasn't just the rain outside, it was something internal, as if the building were sweating. I stopped. I looked at the locked door that separated the two wings. The sign read, "Restricted access, maintenance." There was dampness running down the wall next to the door, a dark, shiny stain. I ran my hand over it. It was cold, wet. I stood there, listening to the rain hitting the windows, and for a second, I swore I heard something else. Something like water running inside the walls. I shook my head. "You're tired, Emma. That's all." I went back to my office. I finished my shift. I drove home in the dark, with the sound of the rain hammering against the windshield. But before going to sleep, I looked out the window of my apartment. The storm was getting worse. Lightning ripped across the sky above the mountains. And something inside me, something small, whispering, said, "You shouldn't have come back." The week went by slowly. Routine, patience, paperwork, everything normal, everything safe, but the dampness in the hallway didn't go away. Every time I walked past, the stain on the wall was bigger, darker. I called maintenance twice. They said they would check it. They never did. On Thursday night, I stayed late. The night shift was small, just me, 2 nurses, and a security guard. The budget had been cut. The place was empty after 10 o'clock. I was finishing up my notes when I heard it. Water running. It wasn't the rain. It was inside the walls. As if someone had turned on a tap somewhere it shouldn't exist. I got up. I followed the sound. He came from the hallway, from the locked door, from the East Wing. I stopped in front of the door. The sound was louder there, clearer. Water running, flowing, sliding through pipes that no one had used for years. And then I saw, on the floor, right below the door, a puddle. Small, perhaps the size of a plate. The water was dark, almost black under the dim light of the hallway. I knelt down. I ran my fingers along the edge. It was cold, freezing. It wasn't just dampness, it was real water, pooled, stagnant. There was no visible leak, no broken pipes, nothing. But the puddle was still there. I kept watching, and then I noticed something strange. The water was moving, not like a wave, not like a current. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, as if it were Viva, tracing around my fingers, gently pulling away from them. I pulled my hand away. I stood up. I took a deep breath. "You're tired, Emma. That's all." I went back to my office. I picked up the phone. I called maintenance again. I left a message. No one answered. I sat in silence, listening to the rain outside. The storm had returned. Distant thunder echoed through the mountains, and then the sound started again, water running, higher now, closer. I left the room. I went back to the hallway. The puddle had grown. It was no longer the size of a plate. It was the size of a bowl, dark, shiny, reflecting the pale light from the ceiling, and it was still expanding, slowly, silently, like something that breathes. I took a step back. The water stopped, exactly where my feet had been before. She had walked around me. My heart raced. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the puddle. The surface was perfectly smooth, no ripples, no movement, but something about her seemed wrong. It wasn't just water. There was something else, underwater. A shadow, a shape. I brought the flashlight closer. The shadow moved. I stepped back so fast that I tripped. I fell on my back. The flashlight rolled across the floor, illuminating the ceiling. I lay there, breathing rapidly, listening to my heart pounding in my ears. Nothing happened. I grabbed the flashlight. I stood up. I looked at the puddle. She was there, motionless, normal, just water. I walked back to my classroom. I grabbed my bag. I left. In the parking lot, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear. The stars shone over the mountains. I got in the car. I turned on the ignition. I looked in the rearview mirror. On the fogged glass, a drop trickled slowly, and inside it, for a fraction of a second, I saw something. A face. Not mine. I wiped the glass with my sleeve. I looked again. Nothing. Just my reflection. Pale. Frightened. "You're tired, Emma. That's all." I drove home. I took a shower. I lay down, but I didn't sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that puddle, that shadow, that face, and one question kept nagging at me. What's inside the water? I went back the next day because I had no choice, because running away would be admitting that something was wrong with me, and I couldn't admit that, not again. The puddle had disappeared. The hallway was dry. The stain on the wall was still there, but smaller, as if it had receded. I spent the whole day trying to convince myself that I had imagined it all. Exhaustion, stress, the same symptoms that brought me down 6 months ago. But at night, when the staff had left and the building was empty, I went back to the hallway. I needed to see it. I needed to be sure. The door to the east wing was still locked. The hallway was silent, only the faint hum of the fluorescent lights, and then I heard it again. Water running. My stomach tightened. The puddle was back. Bigger this time. Much bigger. It stretched for almost 2 meters, starting under the door and extending down the hallway like a dark tongue. I stood there, watching. The water didn't move. It didn't ripple. It just stayed there, waiting. I grabbed my cell phone. I turned on the flashlight. I approached. "It's just water, Emma. Just water." I knelt at the edge of the puddle. I pointed the light, and I saw my reflection. Messy hair, deep dark circles under the eyes, tired expression. But then, the reflection blinked. I didn't blink. My whole body froze. The reflection smiled. I didn't smile. And then the face changed. It wasn't mine anymore. He was a man, pale, wet hair stuck to his forehead, deep-set, dark, empty eyes. He was wearing something white, an old, faded hospital pajama, and he was smiling, a wide smile, slow, as if he were seeing something funny. I screamed. I stepped back. I stumbled. I fell so hard on my back that I hit my head on the ground. The lantern rolled. The The light swirled across the ceiling. I lay there, breathless, heart pounding in my chest, eyes fixed on the puddle. Silence. Nothing moved. I picked up the flashlight with a trembling hand. I stood up slowly. I pointed it at the water. My reflection, only mine, pale, terrified, but mine. I ran out. I ran down the hallway. I went down the stairs. I crossed the empty lobby. I went out the front door. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I stopped in the parking lot, hunching over, trying to breathe. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. But it was. I got in the car. I turned on my phone's computer. I searched for Colorado Ridge, Psychiatric Institute History of Deceased Patients. Multiple results. Old articles, scandals, lawsuits. I clicked on one. A patient dies during experimental therapy, 1953. The article was short. There was little information, but there was a name. Henry Caldwell, 29 years old, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, died during forced hydrotherapy, accidental drowning. There was a photo, black and white, out of focus, but it was him. The same face, the same hair, the same smile. I put my phone down. I looked at the building. The windows in the east wing were dark, but in one of them, for a second, I saw something. A silhouette. Stop, looking down. For me, I started the car. I drove away. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw raindrops on the rear window. It wasn't raining, and within one of the drops, reflected, distorted, there he was. Henry, closer now, much closer. I cleaned the glass. I looked again. Nothing. I drove home crying. If this made you uncomfortable, imagine what comes next. Sign up. I didn't go back to the hospital for 3 days. I called and said I was sick. It wasn't a lie. I was. It just wasn't the kind of illness that medicine can cure. I spent my days locked in my apartment, researching everything about Henry Caldwell. There wasn't much. Some old digitized hospital records, accounts from retired employees, a yellowed newspaper photograph. He had been hospitalized in 1951. 2 years later, he was dead. The official cause of death, accidental drowning during a therapeutic procedure. The truth, according to an archived case file I found, he was forced into a bathtub of ice water for hours. They said it was to calm violent episodes. He went into hypothermic shock. He stopped breathing. No one was held accountable. I closed my laptop. I looked out the window. It was raining again. I went to the kitchen to get some water. I turned on the tap. The liquid flowed down the sink, crystal clear, normal. But when I looked at the bottom of the sink, where the water collected before going down the drain, I saw a face. Henry. Looking up, smiling. I turned off the tap so quickly that the lever almost broke. The water receded. The face disappeared. I stood there, hands trembling, breath short. No, not here. Not in my house. But he was. I started avoiding water. I didn't wash dishes. I didn't shower. I drank bottled water straight from the bottle, but it was no use. The bathroom mirror was fogged up after my neighbor took a shower. In the puddle of coffee I spilled on the table, on the window pane, wet from the rain. Whenever there was still, reflective water, he was there, sometimes far away, sometimes near, sometimes smiling, sometimes not, but always watching. I'm always seeing myself. I went back to the hospital on Monday, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to understand. Dr. Holloway called me into his office as soon as I arrived. "Emma, we need to talk." He had that look, that tone, the same as 6 months ago. "You're not well. The nurses told me you spent the entire night in the East Ward hallway last week, that you screamed, that you ran out. I saw something. Emma, I saw something." He sighed. He crossed his arms. You just came back from burnout. You went through a difficult divorce. You're under pressure, and now you're seeing things. These are not hallucinations. So what are they? I couldn't reply. He leaned forward. Emma, I'd like you to consider taking a few more days off. Talk to someone. You know how this works. You're a psychiatrist. You know what's going on. I left the room. I went straight to the hallway. The puddle was there, bigger than ever, almost reaching halfway down the hallway. No one else saw it. No one else cared, just me. I knelt on the edge. I looked at the water. Henry was there. But this time he wasn't smiling. He was crying. Tears streamed down her pale face. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. Her hands were raised, pressed against something invisible, as if trapped under glass. And then I heard it. Not with my ears. Not really. But I heard, "Help!" I stepped back. I stood up. "What do you want?" The water rippled. Just once. And then the voice again, clearer. They drowned me. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. I know what they did to you. Then why does nobody remember? I opened my eyes. Henry was still there, looking at me, no longer crying. Just empty. I remember, I whispered. The water stopped moving. And then, slowly, the puddle began to recede, going back under the door, disappearing. I was left alone in the hallway. But when I left the hospital that night, when I got into the car, when I looked in the rearview mirror, he was still there, on the fogged glass, in the rain, in the water, because I had seen it. I had remembered. And now, he wasn't going to let me forget. The storm arrived on Friday, not just any rain, a real storm. The kind that makes mountains disappear behind gray curtains and turns roads into rivers. I should have left. I should have gotten out before it was too late. But I didn't leave, because something inside me knew. I knew I needed to be there, that this was going to end, one way or another. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the power went out. The lights flickered. They went out. The emergency generators kicked in, but only illuminated the main wing. The east wing remained in darkness. The night security guard found me in the hallway. "Dr. Corrigan, you need to leave. The storm is getting worse. The road is going to close." "I know. Just a few more minutes." He hesitated. He looked at the locked door of the east wing. "You keep coming here, every night. Why?" I didn't reply. He shook his head and walked away. I was left alone. The puddle was already there. Enormous, taking up almost the entire hallway. The water was dark, deep, impossibly so. I knelt on the edge. "Henry." Nothing. "I know you're there." The surface rippled, and then he appeared. Not just the reflection, not just the face. He was within, out of the water, submerged, floating, as if the puddle were 3 meters deep instead of centimeters. Eyes open, mouth open, hair floating around the head. He raised a hand. He pressed it against the surface, as if he were trapped under ice, and then the water began to rise, not spreading, rising, vertically, filling the corridor as if it were a tank. I stood up. I stepped back. I hit the wall. The water reached my ankles, freezing, piercing. No. I ran to the door that led back to the main wing, locked. I pulled. I hit. I yelled. Nobody heard. The water reached my knees. I turned around. Henry was standing now, in the water, a few feet from me, completely submerged, but walking, getting closer. "What do you want?" He stopped. He opened his mouth. Water came out, and then, clearly, I heard, "They forgot me. Everyone forgot me. as if I never existed. I haven't forgotten. I know what they did to you. Knowing is not enough. The water reached my waist. So what do you want? What can I do? He tilted his head. That slow smile returned. Stay. Drown with me. That way, someone will remember us both. No. They'll find you. They'll write reports. They'll say you've gone mad. That you drowned in a locked ward during a storm. And they'll wonder, how? Why? The water reached my chest. My breath became short, rapid, pure panic. Henry, please. He approached. He extended his hand. I don't want to hurt you, Emma. I just want someone to remember. And then I understood. I grabbed my cell phone. It was still working, protected in my inside pocket. I opened the camera. I recorded. My name is Emma Corrigan. I'm at the Colorado Ridge Psychiatric Institute. There's rising water. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I need you to know. In 1953, a patient named Henry Caldwell died here. They drowned him. They called it therapy. And nobody paid. Nobody cared. He existed. He suffered. And nobody remembers. I held my phone above the water, recording Henry, recording everything. Now you'll remember. The water stopped. Henry stood motionless, staring at his cell phone. At me, and then, slowly, he smiled. It wasn't sinister anymore. It was sad, thankful. The water began to recede, quickly, as if it were being sucked back into the walls, onto the floor, into nowhere. Within seconds, the corridor was dry. Henry disappeared. A porta se destranco. Abri. Corri. I left the hospital soaked, trembling, but alive. I sent the video to everyone I could think of. Journalists, historians, human rights, activists. Someone had to see it. Someone had to know. I didn't go back to Colorado Ridge. I moved. Another state, another job, another name, almost. But Henry wouldn't leave me. Not in a bad way. Not anymore. It just appears, every now and then, in puddles of rain, on foggy windows, in coffee cups, always distant now, always quiet, just observing, as if checking, making sure I don't forget. And I don't forget. Because every time I see still, clean, reflective water, I see Henry Caldwell, 29 years old, paranoid schizophrenia, drowned in 1953, and now you see it too. Now you remember too.